Alright guys, well it's Friday and that means that the vendors have reset and I'm going to be going through and doing a complete guide of every single vendor. There'll be an index at the bottom of the screen showing which safe house or which checkpoint that I'm at as long as I am there. And I'm going to start with the base of operations, do everything that's there. I'll talk about the vendor in the hub, I'll discuss everything in this area, and then I'll progress in a counterclockwise way around the persistent world to every single safe house. I'm going to cover every single item that they have that is possibly worth buying, all the high ends. Then I'm going to progress in a counterclockwise method around the dark zone checkpoints, again covering every single item there and giving my thoughts on every single piece. And then I will progress south through the dark zone to all the different safe houses. Now I am going to try and abbreviate this a little bit more than last time and make it a little bit shorter, but hopefully there's some good information for everyone. First off, we have the base weapons vendor, and at this vendor we have a Burstfire MP5A4. You can reroll Predatory, has Deadly and Unforgiving in the second and third slots. It's a decent Burstfire gun. If you're trying to make a build work around this, it is possible, but it's not a GODROLL. And then we have a 5.52 hollow sight with critical hit chance, not something I recommend buying. Moving on to the base gear vendor, we have Savage Gloves. These are not rolled well, and I would not recommend buying them. They have electronics, pistol, assault rifle damage, and then critical hit chance. And then we have a stamina mod with skill haste. Again, I don't recommend buying this. There's nothing at this vendor I would consider a GODROLL. At the base Dark Zone gear vendor, what you're going to find is this ACR with Dominant, Ferocious, and Destructive. Due to the fact that Ferocious and Destructive are paired together, this could be a viable PvE weapon. However, they're in the wrong order, and I would not recommend buying this unless you are running a hybrid nature build that hedges towards skill. Moving on, we have this Tenacious Mask. Not very good. It's got a low electronics roll. It doesn't have a minor attribute that you really want or a major attribute that's all that appealing, although skill power is okay. A performance mod of First Aid Ally Heal. I would recommend buying this if you are going to run a support build at any time in the future. It's a very convenient way to pick up over 20% if you pair 4 of them together. First Aid Ally Heal for a variety of builds. And then we have a small RDS scope with stability, critical hit chance, and optimal range. Not a very good scope right here. Moving on to the advanced weaponry vendor, I'm actually going to skip over almost everything that's here in favor of one item. The pistol you don't want, the AUG you don't want, etc., until you get to this military Scar H. Now, this gun has Deadly, Destructive, and Prepared, and the Scar H is actually a very strong marksman rifle at this time. So I would recommend buying this and re-rolling any one of these talents based on where you want to be fighting in a positional standpoint. If you want to be fighting from long range, keep Prepared, re-roll Deadly maybe, re-roll Destructive. This is a weapon that is versatile and something I would recommend picking up and trying out at some point. So that's a very good pickup. For all the different modifications, there's nothing really substantial here. However, this muzzle brake is okay. It is going to go very well on something like a high RPM assault rifle with stability and then a good amount of headshot damage as well, though it's not considered the best in slot for straight DPS. The stability is very nice though, and this is a well-rolled muzzle brake. Next up, we have the special equipment vendor in the hub. This is a heavy hitter. There's a lot of items here. However, this week it is not very juicy. You have the typical, named weapons. Then you have a bunch of guns, none of which I would consider to be very potent. This military SA-58 does have very high base damage, though it is a burst fire rotation. Has Deadly, Unforgiving, and Determined. It could be used in a hybrid build. It's something you might consider, but for the price tag, it's not something I would recommend. This SRSA-1 with Destructive, Adept, and Accurate could be re-rolled. Could be something that you might look into using, but again, you're probably going to have something better from just basic farming methods. And then everything else outside of this is something that I wouldn't really strongly recommend buying. If you don't have any other existing items in these gear sets, then they are perfectly okay. However, the only other item of note is this Striker's Harness with a decent stamina roll, not very high. You would have to re-roll this to armor, but it does already have health as a major attribute and ammo capacity as a minor attribute. So this Striker's Harness is okay to pick up. It can be re-rolled and used in a variety of builds if you are looking to run Striker. But again, there's a lot of better best-in-slot chest pieces that you could be running that would augment many more builds much better. Again, there's not many here that you would like. If you are looking to run something with skill power and high electronics, this Nomad backpack is nothing to laugh at. But it's not going to fit into the majority of players' play styles. It does have electronics and has armor, but you would not be able to re-roll to both ammo capacity and away from electronics to stamina or firearms. So again, it's not going to fit into very many playstyles. I'm just going to mouse over very quickly all the rest of the items. If you want to pause and take a look, this is everything that's here, but there's nothing here that I would strongly recommend buying. If you do want to buy a performance mod to augment pulse and you don't have any already, then 5% pulse duration in a tandem with 4 of them is going to have a substantial impact on pulse. However, it's not something, again, that you're going to build around. And then a bunch of mods that, again, are not best in slot and not very juicy. For the special blueprints vendor, it is the age of the shotgun right now, and while they did sustain a serious nerf previously, you have 2 blueprints available here. You have the Super 90 and you have the M870 Express blueprint. So anybody interested in shotguns is going to be able to pick these up. They're gear score 256, roll as many of them as they want, and basically make a build around a hard-hitting shotgun. So we have both different shotgun types here, Super 90 and M870, and I would recommend picking these up. We also have an electronics backpack blueprint, which is okay. It can be, crafted and then re-rolled, and it could come with specialized, so that's something, again, I would recommend picking up. But it's not something that's going to be a game changer. We don't see an LVOAC blueprint here or anything like that, which would really throw the metagame for a spin. And then we have a Firearms backpack as well at 256 gear score. And I would recommend buying all of these again to add to your build library, to add to your crafting and blueprint library, to make it so that you're more diverse when you're putting together a build and you can craft more things. But that's kind of a generalization pretty much every single week, as you're going to be buying as many blueprints as possible. At the Autumn's Hope Safehouse, what we find is a nimble holster, as I'll show here. I do not recommend buying this, and a prototype firearms mod with skill power. This is a well-rolled firearms mod, but it does not have armor, so it's not the best in slot. However, the skill power is quite powerful, so if you want to augment this and put this into existing builds to increase both skill power and firearms dramatically, it's a solid pickup if you don't have better mods already. At the Wolves Den Safehouse, what we find is a custom L86A2 with prepared, capable, and swift. And while this isn't a bad gun, LMGs just aren't capable of contending right now with the assault rifle meta. And even though it does have good damage to targets out of cover, good base damage scaling, and some interesting talents, you could reroll capable, it's not something that can compete unless you're heart set on an LMG, in which case you might want to give it a go. We also have a vertical grip Wolf Grey, but nothing special about this. Moving on to the Dantes Run Safehouse, what we find is this steadfast holster. I do not recommend buying it, though if you really want to make some kind of health regeneration build, it can fit into that. And then we have a prototype performance mod with pulse critical hit damage. All of these paired together are not that strong, but they do augment pulse and give you more burst damage, so it's a possibility for some builds in the future. Next up, we have the KERMAN Station Safehouse. There's nothing of note here. We have a pistol that you won't want, and then we also have a quick release magazine that does not have good stats. Moving on to the CAVERN Safehouse, what we find here is a little bit more interesting. What we have is a steadfast holster. I do not recommend buying this, but the real interest is this prototype performance mod with first aid self-heal. I will be picking this up for a variety of builds. This will increase your survivability, increase the amount that you can heal yourself with something like Booster Shot. Very valuable performance mod, and I would recommend buying 4 of these immediately if you don't already have 4 to fit into various different builds that utilize more healing and need more healing to stay alive. Moving on to the Camp Hudson's weapon vendor, what we find here is a shotgun that you do not want, especially since there's a blueprint available in the hub right now, and a quick release magazine that's not going to be very influential on any builds whatsoever. Moving on to the Camp Hudson gear vendor, what we find is these accomplished knee pads. I don't recommend buying these. And then we have a prototype performance mod with sticky bomb explosion radius. This can be quite fun for a support build with a hard-hitting sticky bomb, and I would recommend picking up 4 if you want to have one that's going to hit for a substantially increased radius, but it's not something that's going to make or break a lot of builds. At the MEATLOCKER Safehouse, we do not find anything of note. We just have this double barrel sawed-off. You're not going to want that, though it does have brutal and responsive, just in case you really want to make a sawed-off build work. This could be kind of fun, but I'm not going to classify it as a GODROLL because double barrel sawed-off, it's not really something that you can put mods in. It only has 2 rounds, but it does have brutal responsive. It can be re-rolled, so it's something that might have some interest. And then we have this heavy magazine spring with reload speed, critical hit chance, rate of fire. I don't recommend purchasing this. Moving on to the MADISON Stand Safehouse, what we find here is a little bit more interesting than previously. We have a vigorous chest piece, though it has bad rolls, and I do not recommend purchasing this. And then we find a prototype performance mod with ballistic shield damage resilience. This is something that is very, very powerful to pick up for an existing ballistic shield build, something like the D3 F&C set, something, we're using a 93R or the Bliss holster. Anything using a ballistic shield, I would recommend buying these to have them in your inventory or in your portfolio to construct builds later on if you need to. Jumping over to the Last Call Safehouse, there is nothing here of note, but I will show what is there just in case anyone wants it. A Paratrooper SVD with Swift, Skilled, and Disciplined. Do not recommend purchasing it. And then we have an Osprey Suppressor with Accuracy, Critical Hit Damage, and Critical Hit Chance. This is potentially going to be used for something like a D3 F&C build to increase the accuracy on your SMG, but it's not something that you're going to break the bank for and jump at the opportunity to purchase. Moving on to the Ward Safehouse, we find a few things. There is a Tenacious Mask with stamina. If you don't already have a Tenacious Mask, you could buy this and re-roll it, but it is by no means a god roll. And then we have just another performance mod with Sticky Bomb Explosion Radius. However, the important thing to note is that this one does have 6% Sticky Bomb Explosion Radius. I do recommend purchasing these, again, like I said previously, to augment a support style build where you have a hard-hitting Sticky Bomb, but it's not something that's going to really shape the whole progression of the Dark Zone. It's not something that's going to have a drastic impact on a lot of builds. Jumping over to the Southpaw Safehouse, we find a couple of things that might be interesting to a few players. A technical backpack, which has a decent talent and a decent stamina roll to boot, but it does not have armor or ammo capacity, which means only one of those could be re-rolled and thus is not a god roll. And then we have this performance mod with Seeker Mine damage at 4%. Anyone that likes the Seeker Mine, and I know a couple of people within our community that really do, make sure to purchase some of these because 4% is a great roll and you can augment the damage on your Seeker Mine significantly. At the Grindhouse, we find a couple of things that no one is going to want. We have a pistol that has bad talents. I mean, it has destructive, but it's just a regular tactical M1911. You're not going to want that at all. And then we have an RDS scope with stability, critical hit damage, optimal range. I don't recommend purchasing either of those items. Moving on to the Firewall Safehouse, we finally have something that people should be very conscious of. This tactical pack is not the item that I'm referencing. It does have an okay stamina roll and has skill power, but it would need to be re-rolled. A couple of things. It doesn't have ammo capacity, so a relentless talent here, which could be fit into some builds, but it's not something you're going to break the bank for. And then we have a prototype stamina mod with armor. Now, this is by no means a god rolled mod, but I am putting the god roll title down here just so that people know that this is a place where you can buy stamina mods, power level 34, with armor, and these will go very well with a variety of builds. So make sure that if you don't already have better mods for stamina with armor, to pick this one up here in at least a quantity of 5 so you can fit it into every slot should you need to when you're building moving forward. On to our last safe house, we get to the CRYPT. Now this does have a fairly interesting item. We have a classic M44 carbine with capable, vicious, and adept. This is a lot of crit chance on one gun, and you can re-roll capable. It does have very good base damage as well, so I'd recommend picking this up if you want to experiment with maybe like a one-tap sniper build, but there are other variations out there that are better. So it's just a possibility, not something I would highly recommend. Then we have an extended mag, and if you don't already have an extended magazine, then you can go ahead and pick this up, but it does not have the optimal attributes. It does not have magazine size, critical hit chance, and then RPM. It actually just has magazine size at 105%, crit hit damage, and reload speed. However, it is something that you can buy if you don't have a better existing magazine. To kick off the rotation of Dark Zone checkpoints, we have West 53rd Street, and there is something very important to note here. This tactical ACR is not that item. It's just predatory, fierce, and talented. I wouldn't recommend buying this. These tactical gloves with Savage are not very well rolled. Again, no recommendation here. But this prototype firearms mod has armor. That means that this vendor reset, you have stamina and firearms mods with armor. And I would recommend picking up, if you don't already have better versions of these, 5 of each. Now, it's not a very high firearms roll. It is high enough, power level 34, but it has a very good armor roll. And again, definitely pick up enough of these to round out any DPS builds that you want to. They will increase toughness as well. This is a very solid pickup. Moving on to West 46th Street, what we find here is not very interesting. I would not recommend buying this AUG. It is not a competitive gun, especially for PvP. Cunning gloves are not something you're going to be utilizing very often. The electronics mod does not have armor, though it does have decent electronics and some EDR, so it could be used to counter a sticky bomb or seeker mine build situationally. And then the reflex sight is not very good either. So there's nothing here that I would, tell everyone to pick up right away. Nothing's going to jump off the page. Moving on to West 42nd Street, what we find here is a Super 90 with Brutal, Fierce, and Accurate. These are decent talents. You could reroll Fierce, but with the availability of the current Super 90 blueprint in the hub, I would not recommend purchasing this. We have an Operator Mask with Refresh. This is not rolled very well. I would not recommend buying that. Prototype Stamina Mod with Skill Haste, not worthwhile. And then this Holographic Sight, again, not worthwhile, with Optimal Range as the major attribute. Next up, we have West 39th Street, and at this vendor, we have a few things that you don't really need to pay attention to. M249B with not great talents. We have a Spec Ops pack. It's well rolled into firearms, but does not have ammo capacity or armor, so only one could be re-rolled there. Another prototype performance mod with First Aid Ally Heal, so if you're looking for an alternative currency type to be able to purchase that, Dark Zone funds are going to be the way to go at this checkpoint vendor. And then an SR7 suppressor with critical hit damage, accuracy, stability, and reduced threat. I would not recommend purchasing this item, and there's nothing at this specific vendor of note. Hopping down to West 34th Street, we can get to this checkpoint vendor right here, and he has a Black Market AK-74 with extremely competitive base damage, fierce, vicious, and prepared. Vicious is not a great talent on an actual assault rifle. It's much better on SMGs. However, it's not a bad talent to have. Prepared is a great talent if you are going to be fighting from range. So if you re-roll Fierce, this could be a very powerful gun from range. Has a decent enemy armor damage roll as well, and it's up to the user whether or not they want to pick that up. We have a sturdy holster here. I do not recommend buying this at all. It has bad rolls. A performance mod with Seeker Mine Explosion Radius. 4 of these together can actually create a much larger explosion radius on the Seeker Mine. So it's something that you could look into if you like that style of gameplay and that skill in particular. And then a heavy magazine spring that I do not recommend purchasing with reload speed, critical hit chance, and rate of fire. Coming down to the West 31st Street checkpoint vendor, what we find is this M60, and it's important to note that this has good damage, has meticulous and skilled is in the 3rd slot, and this could be used to roll into an Alpha Bridge PvE signature skill build. It has 2 out of the 3 talents required to make that build work, and is quite powerful in that regard. However, that is a niche build, and it will only be used for PvE with a very specific set of gun types and talents, again with Alpha Bridge. So that's something you could consider, and there are guides out there on how to put that together. Then we have these Spec Ops pads. I would not recommend purchasing these, although they do have enemy armor damage as a minor attribute, and if you are looking for electronics pads for an all high-end build, for instance, for a supporting role, they can be okay, though they are not God-rolled by any means. Then we have Prototype Performance Mod with Pulse Duration, just an alternate way to purchase it with a different currency type, and then a compensator with stability, headshot damage, and accuracy. This could be used quite well on something like a lightweight M4, on something with a high RPM, such as an assault rifle LVOAC variant type, but not something I would recommend buying right off the bat. At the 5th Ave checkpoint, what we find is this military M870 with commanding, responsive, and swift. I might recommend buying this if they didn't have an available blueprint for a better gun type in the hub right now and you could roll for better talents. Tactical gloves with decisive, I do not recommend purchasing these. However, if you are looking for a dedicated pistol build, these might get some use. They do already have the decisive talent and pistol damage with a okay, decent firearms roll, which means critical hit damage and then marksman rifle damage could be re-rolled for critical hit chance. These could be a decent pistol build pickup for those players that want to try that. We have an electronics mod with skill haste. These might be good for a supportive style skill build, faster skills and a lot of electronics. However, I do not recommend buying them because armor is so crucial right now. And then a small laser pointer with accuracy, reload speed, and critical hit damage. Nothing that's very important. Moving on to East 31st Street, moving up the other side of the Dark Zone, we have this Scar L with responsive, determined, and ferocious. This could be a very powerful PvE gun to pick up. It has great base damage. It does have lower RPM, but it already has responsive and ferocious, and you could reroll determined to something like destructive. There's a lot of value in this gun, and I would recommend picking it up for someone that doesn't already have a dedicated PvE build, as it would be very easy to make one around it. This Spec Ops holster does already have armor, so you could re-roll the firearms, and if you are looking to build an all high-end build, this might be a viable choice, though it's not going to be something I slap the GODROLL title onto. Then we have a prototype stamina mod with skill power, not something I would recommend purchasing, and a T-Rant suppressor with critical hit chance, critical hit damage, and stability and reduced threat. I do not recommend buying this item either. Moving on to East 34th Street, we do have some items here that are of particular interest. What we have is a lightweight M4 with destructive, prepared, and adept. You could reroll any one of these talents that you feel is the least valuable to you. It is an M4 variant. It has great base damage, has a great enemy armor damage roll, and I will be slapping the GODROLL title on this, even though some may disagree, because it can be used in Alpha Bridge, it can be used as a standalone, and it is the optimal assault rifle type, so that is a very good pickup. Then we have this tactical vest with robust, has a great stamina roll, already has armor, protection from elites, ammo capacity. You can reroll whatever you'd like to make this fit into a PvE or PvP build. Again, a really solid pickup, increases armor while in cover by 10%. Very solid and will fit into a variety of builds there. Then we have a prototype performance mod with support station range, 7.5%. This is great for a support build. Anyone trying out, a tactician's support build or a reclaimer support build with a support station is going to want 4 of these. That's a fantastic pickup. And then we have a scope with stability, accuracy, and critical hit chance, but nothing interesting there. Moving up to the East 40th Street checkpoint, what we find here is a Vector with brutal, meticulous, and sustained. I do not recommend buying it, especially because SMGs aren't very competitive right now. We have a Tenacious Mask with a good stamina roll. You could buy this item. You could reroll the minor attribute to enemy armor damage and have something that would perform in PvP situations. It could be something that fits into some builds. We have a stamina mod with health. I do not recommend buying this. We have a small grip with critical hit damage, reload speed, and accuracy, and I also do not recommend buying this, and there's nothing really at this vendor of note. Next up, we have East 42nd Street, and I can already tell you there's nothing of note here. The Black Market M60 with accurate adept dominant does not fit into any build very well. Steadfast holster, while it does have some good rolls, is not something you're really going to want. Maybe in a health regeneration build, and you could reroll for armor. We have a prototype performance mod with smart cover damage resilience, but I don't encounter very many people running smart cover anymore. And then a flash hider with accuracy, stability, and critical hit damage. Nothing of note there. Moving on up to East 46th Street, what we find here is a double barrel sawed-off with no really interesting talents. We have a Spec Ops mask with Rehabilitated, not something you're going to want to purchase. We have a prototype performance mod. This is the one item of note with 2% pulse critical hit chance. And 4 of these together is going to create significant burst on your pulse. So I would recommend buying these if you want to run them, you know, in a solo build with the concealed pulse and give it a little bit chunk more offensive capabilities. Really good pickup there. And then we have some iron sights with stability, critical hit damage, and accuracy, and I don't recommend buying that. Over here at the East 53rd Street vendor, what we find is not very exciting. We have a police UMP with responsive, meticulous, and ambusher, but you would need to re-roll 2 things in order for this to be good, so I wouldn't recommend purchasing it. An operator holster with not very good rolls, and you would have to re-roll armor, so again, no recommendation here. Prototype firearms mod with skill haste, not recommended, and a rugged mini reflex sight with critical hit chance, optimal range, and headshot damage. This could be useful for something like an SMG MP7 because it does have a good roll on critical hit chance and it does have some headshot damage, but it's not an optimal god rolled rugged mini reflex sight right there. Moving on to our next heavy hitters, we start with the DZ6 Safehouse, and here we find a couple of interesting items. First of all, there's a lot of Deadeye, and while I don't recommend purchasing most of it, it is something for someone that really wants to put together a Deadeye set, going to be a solid pickup. Now, this mask does already have critical hit chance, but that works a little bit counterproductive to what Deadeye does, so it would need to be re-rolled. Does not have enemy armor damage, not a recommended pickup, but a decent firearms roll. The chest piece, however, does have some good rolls, has over 1200 stamina, very good there, has armor and EDR already baked in, and ammo capacity. So this is a good chest piece for a Deadeye build if you are looking to pick one up. The Go Bag does not have very good attributes here. No ammo capacity, signature ability resource gain would have to be re-rolled for armor, and it does have electronics, so no recommendation there. For the Striker's knee pads, this could be a very good item. It has over 1200 firearms. It does not have armor, would have to be re-rolled for that, but it does already have enemy armor damage as a minor attribute, so this could be a solid pickup. The Striker's holster, no recommendation. You'd have to re-roll for armor. It has a bad firearms and bad electronics roll. And then the Reclaimer gloves have potential. They're not a god roll by any means, but they do have a very high firearms roll. So someone trying to go DPS support would have a lot of potential with these gloves. Moving on to the DZ5 weapon mod Safehouse, there are a few things that I don't recommend buying right off the bat, but could be good if you don't have any existing mods that are better. Reload speed, mag size, and rate of fire on a quick release mag. On a suppressor, we have accuracy, stability, critical hit damage. That's a possible pickup. For a hand stop, we have reload speed, accuracy, stability. That might be very good for certain builds and certain playstyles. And then for iron sights, we have stability, headshot damage, critical hit damage. This could be good as well. Again, if you don't have any existing mods that are better than these. Moving on to the Dark Zone gear mod vendor in DZ4. What we have here is a prototype stamina mod with EDR. I do not recommend buying this, and a prototype performance mod with support station healing speed. This is great for a support build using a support station. However, support station range is just as good, and it's really user's preference on which choice they'd go with. Moving on down to the Dark Zone weapons vendor, there's a really sad story here. There's nothing good. We have a first wave X45 with Expert and Brutal, but it's not something that's going to compete with the 93R. We have a first wave Vector with Unforgiving, Fierce, Commanding. Don't recommend buying that. Enhanced ACR, bad talents on that. An SASG with not the right talents to be competitive. We have a SOCOM MK20 SSR. Again, just nothing here that's really competitive. And then an Infantry MG5 with Adept, Brutal, and Talented. This might have some value if you are trying to run a skill build with an LMG. However, I don't see it getting used in very many builds. And it's a sad story that this weapons vendor, out of all these choices, has nothing even remotely close to a god roll. Lastly, we have the Gear Safehouse in DZ2. And again, it's unfortunate to note that there are no god rolls. We have another Tenacious Mask. I do not recommend purchasing this one. We have an Operator Vest with Robust. Again, not a very good roll. You'd have to re-roll too many things and it can't be viable. We have a Tactical Pack with Relentless that does have a very good firearms roll and does already have ammo capacity, so it could be worked into maybe some builds here and there, but nothing I would consider a god roll. And then we have Tactical Pads with Prosperous. I don't recommend buying those. A Spec Ops holster with Sturdy, not recommended again. And Tactical Gloves with Astute. No seal of recommendation on these either. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for my vendor coverage on this 12/9/2016. So let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if you'd like to see anything specific from us in the future. And make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more gaming content from us later on as Upper Echelon evolves. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Check out the links below if you want to support the channel. Please check out our Facebook group and our Discord. They're great communities. You can matchmake, etc. A lot of good things going on. And as always, have a nice night.